Well, hi everyone, this is Thane. Here we are, week 8 reflections. This is going to be a short and sweet video. I'm trying to get my innovation style paper done, so in a somewhat ironic twist of fate, it's leaving me less time to be innovative with the video blog this week, but that's okay. It can't all be interesting. Um, you may notice this isn't a 6 second Vine video. I still want to do that. That's my personal goal for this class is to do my video blog as a Vine in 6 seconds before the end of the semester. So I'm going to do that. So be on the lookout for that. It's going to be great whenever it happens. Whenever a week comes up that I have exactly 6 seconds worth of stuff that I want to reflect on. But this week I've got a solid 12 seconds at least that I want to talk about. First of all, I really like Nina Simone's book. I really liked her TED Talk. I thought was excellent, and so far I really like her book. I think it's very interesting. I think her perspective and what she's doing with museums and what she's encouraging other people to do is great. I love the hands-on stuff. I think it's very interesting. In the one, sorry, I'm looking at the reflection questions here on the screen. I think the benefits to creating audience-centered cultural, some of the benefits of creating an audience-centered cultural institution is that it invites engagement. It's not passive learning, like we've kind of talked about. Going back to the new culture of learning. I think was the first book we read in this class, but instead of just old school instruction, just being talked to and being expected later to just regurgitate everything. I think that the participatory museum is kind of a similar idea, where it's more hands-on, where you're more involved, you're more engaged in what's going on in the museum, and it's also a creative experience for the people visiting the museum. They get to share that, which I think is great, and I think it's exciting, and I think the success in Nina Simone's museum demonstrates that this is catching on. Another one of the reflection questions was talking about the risks of losing identity with the museum, and I think museums are something that traditionally been associated with cultural elitism, maybe a little bit. I know the quote in the TED Talk. She talked about the person not cringing at the thought of being inundated with Sunday painters. Certainly speaks to elitism, and I think museums traditionally cater to those people. Nina talked about how, I believe she talked about how audiences were getting like older and whiter at museums, and I think that goes along with people who have money and who consider themselves culturally elite, and I think that's museums cater to that because that's where a lot of their income comes from, and I think that's where the attitude came from about the person not wanting Sunday painters. And I think I would think, I don't run a museum. I don't really have a lot of strong perspective on this, but I would think the people who traditionally serve an elite wealthy population would be very worried about losing that population and isolating that population and just having the common folk take over the museum who want to get their hands dirty, and losing all their funding. But in her TED Talk, she had that demonstration where she showed how the income of the museum has skyrocketed since they made all these changes. So I thought that was fascinating, and I'd like, maybe she gets into it more later in the book, but I'd like to hear more about that. Is it just attendance going way up? Is that why they have more money? Because I would think if I was running a museum, that would be my biggest concern in making something attractive and interesting and different that's going to get different people in, is that it's not going to get the kind of people who have the dough who are going to pay for all this crap. But going back to the book, the Participatory Museum book, right in the beginning, I'm going to quote it here. She defines participatory cultural institution as a place where visitors can create, share, and connect with each other around content. When I read that, it immediately made me think of Scratch. Scratch is it's a programming platform. It's kind of a very simplified programming platform that's developed by MIT to get kids interested in programming. You can see it at scratch.mit.edu. and I immediately thought of that because I've been using a Scratch a lot lately for another class I'm in on gamification, and using it to make video games, to make learning video games. But it's a very, if you're not familiar with it, it's a very interesting website. It's basically its own program, but it's all online. You don't have to download anything, which is nice. So you can access it from anywhere. You have internet connection, and you can work on your games, and you can look at other people's games. And one of the interesting ways that they design this is that you make your game, and then when it's done, you share your game. And once your game is shared, other people can play it on Scratch, but other people can also get into the code and see exactly how you did certain things. And there's an option called remixing, which is something Nina also talked about in participatory culture, remixing. So as it applies to Scratch, you can take someone's game and change it around, or take elements from it, or do whatever you want with it. I've used it to the remixing ability to borrow things people have done in their games and rework them for different game assignments I've been working on. So I just thought it was interesting how well Scratch fits this idea of which as a participatory cultural institution, as Nina Simone defines it. There's also people chat on Scratch and talk about each other's games, and I'm fairly new to it. I've only been using it for a couple weeks, really, but I think people who are way into it. It very much serves as a social network where they get to know each other and learn from each other, which is great. I think Scratch might have come up in one of our readings earlier where they talked about that. They talked about a new way of learning. Talked about, yeah, I'm pretty sure it was this class where it talked about the kid who was learning to program through Scratch, and how he was learning from other people, and how he's taking some traditional classes, but most of the learning was through the actual platform of Scratch. Now that I'm talking about this, I'm almost positive it was this class, and I think it was part of the New Culture of Learning book where we read about that. So moving along, so audience participation museum. I think this is definitely a direction libraries can go in different ways. The digital revolution and everything means that creating data and storing data is easier and cheaper than it's ever been, ever. So I think libraries are starting to take advantage of that. I don't have good examples of places doing this, but I've heard a lot of people talk about things like gathering autobiographies people are writing, and how you could store that on the library website, and you could build an archive that way. And over time, historically, that would be something pretty incredible to have access to be able to access first-person accounts of history. And people are doing it all the time. People are doing it, on blogs everywhere. But to kind of store that in a library website or something like that, and to have that searchable and accessible, I think is extremely doable and extremely valuable. And I would love to see libraries doing more stuff like that. What else? Oh, the Denver Public Library is doing something sort of along that lines with music, which is interesting. This is a new thing. I know some people involved with it. It's not live yet. I think it's going to go live in June, last I heard. But they're doing a local music project where this is going to be part of the Denver Public Library website, and it's going to be a catalog of local musicians. Where I don't know if it's going to be streaming or if you can actually download the music, but the idea was to give anyone who has a library card access to all this different local music that's been recorded. And I think that's a neat way of utilizing this very cheap technology and accessible technology to share stuff like that in an organized manner. And my hope is that this would keep up for a long time, and that it could become a historical archive eventually, where people could go through and access follow these different music trends through the hundreds of years they're going to be doing this or whatever. I think would be a very cool thing. Let's see. Let me look at my notes here, see if I wanted to say anything else. And this also participatory culture. Someone talks a lot about design. How good design creates good user content, user generated content. If you have good design, you'll get good content. And she gives the example of some museum she went to where they just had a video thing at the end, record your impressions, and how it was just a bunch of kids goofing off. but that good design will reap good content. In the video, she had that great example of the post-it note thing, question and answer, versus a bathroom door that people wrote on, and that the same people did it, but they wrote like lewd things and scribbled on the bathroom door, where they had like organized and well thought out things on the post-it notes, which I thought was a pretty fascinating way of illustrating that good design will reap good content. And that kind of made me think, as far as participatory culture, it made me think of StoryCorps, which many of you are probably familiar with. It's through NPR, I believe, but they have these booths. They travel around and they record stories, and I believe the idea is to build up like a historical archive of first person accounts of different stories. And I've never participated in the StoryCorps, but from my understanding is that they have these like booths that you go in. I think a couple people can go in, because I've definitely heard multiple people telling stories. But it sounds like it's well designed to give people privacy and make them feel comfortable talking. And I think they're also given a recording of the story that they record, so that it has built-in incentive for people to participate. So I think that's a very good example of participatory culture, and it's NPR, so it's right along the lines of the culturally elite are all about it. Let's see, was there anything else I wanted to say this week? I don't think so. I think that's all I got this week. Thanks for listening, guys. I will see you next week. Bye.